Jackson State is going to be the favorite to win the SWAC for a second year in a row. And to me, the biggest thing that separates them from the rest of the pack is quarterback Jacobian Morgan. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU Podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current site expert at Who Dat Dish and contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusive. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Now, we'll wrap up today's episode with probably one of my favorite segment threes that we've had in a long time, and that is the NBA HBCU Classic and how the association is being very intentional and, in my opinion, very successful with their scheduling of HBCUs. In segment two, Ckelby Givens is predicted to win his second straight Defensive Player of the Year, and in my opinion, he has more than earned that right. However, let's kick things off with the big dogs. Let's kick things off with the defending champions, not just in the SWAC, but in all of HBCU football. I'm talking about the Jackson State Tigers, the T.C. Taylor-led team, the Jacobian Morgan-led team. And it is that player that, in my opinion, is the separating factor between Jackson State and the rest of the pack. It's simple. Now, if you've been an everydayer for a long time, you know I'm not really one for predictions. It's not really my cup of tea. We do a game of the week every single week, and I don't give my prediction. It's two reasons. One, it's just not something I enjoy to do, period. Secondly, I think that when you give predictions, most times you're going to leave out the entire puzzle. You'll leave out at least one piece of it, because your prediction is how you feel, and your explanation will be why you feel that way. I prefer to look at the entire picture. This matchup, that matchup, this matchup, not this matchup and why this guy will win. It's just this matchup and why it's important. These are the storylines. These are the keys to victory. And I think by keeping my predictions out, I can just give that impartially, as opposed to always kind of having my angle. I'm still not biased because I'm just giving my opinion, but I think that it'll be a little bit slanted towards one team if I do say who I think would win. I just lean into that point more naturally. But anyway, I'm not big on predictions, but I don't think that this is a huge statement to say. Jackson State is going to be the favorite to win the SWAC this year. You'll have the preseason polls that will drop on Wednesday at SWAC Media Day. They'll tell you who's going to win the East, who's going to win the West, but they won't tell you who's going to win the conference. That's not going to happen. I predict that Jackson State will be the team to win the East as far as in the polls. That's not a shocker. I don't know who they're going to have to win the West. It'll probably be Southern, to be honest. They'll probably try to roll back with Southern. I'm not mad about that either. But they won't tell you who will win in the SWAC championship game. But I think we all know that the overall favorite, they're the Jackson State Tigers, right? And I have no problem with that. Jacobian Morgan was named the preseason Offensive Player of the Year. And him earning this title empowered me to come on here and say this, because I've said it before to a degree. I said it very slightly when I was talking about who is going to be representing each team at SWAC Media Day. But Jacobian Morgan is a no-brainer to represent Jackson State. He was the preseason, or he is the preseason Offensive Player of the Year. And to me, he is the player that separates Jackson State from everybody else. The reason I say that is because there is so much indecisiveness. There's so much uncertainty. There's not enough confidence. Right? Like, it's a lack of confidence, in my opinion, all over the conference at this position. There's probably a handful of teams, and I'm being generous, there's probably a handful of teams that confidently feel good about their quarterback. And in that handful of teams, I wonder how many feel confident about two quarterbacks because they're really in a quarterback battle. I'd argue if you're in a quarterback battle, I'm probably not putting you in the confident quarterback category. Just being honest with you. But you have Jacobian Morgan as the first team all SWAC quarterback on the preseason team. And then you have Cam Ransom, who is the second team quarterback. And I know I said his name with a certain way, but I just want to make sure all the M's and N's were pronounced. No disrespect. I hate to say that statement followed by what I'm about to say. But if you're telling me that Jacobian Morgan is number one and Cam Ransom is number two, I think that there is a gap between Ransom and Morgan. And that's the best way to depict why I think that Jacobian Morgan is the difference maker, because there's no more important position on the field, right? And it's not like Jacobian Morgan is in a room full of trash. I actually think that this is a good quarterback. I think that he has solid athleticism. I like his arm. That throw that he made in the Celebration Bowl, I believe it was to Fortillion in the back corner of the end zone, where Fortillion had to go up right above the cornerback. I just think about how well that ball was placed. I do think about how strong that Fortillion's hands were, but I think about how well that ball was placed so that the defensive back, it was right over his head. Those type of plays just stick with me when it comes to Jacobian Morgan. And predicting him to be the offensive player of the year makes the most sense. If you're telling me that he's the best guy, and listen, it's a lot around Morgan. But if it comes down to it, who's the quarterback you're going to feel confident to outduel him? Probably your quarterback. But if you took your quarterback out of it, you took your own feelings out of it, sorry for making you biased like that, right? Like you could just genuinely feel this way. But for the most part, the point is, if you're not who is the quarterback that's not on your team that you feel like will outduel Jacobian Morgan and Jackson State? And part of it is the fact that he does have a guy like Fortillion, that he does have a guy like Rembert, that he does have a guy like Savage, right? Like these things do matter. Or not Savage. No, yeah, Savage. So I always confuse him with Shamar Stewart, who came out in the draft this year. But yeah, Shamar Savage, because Shamar Stewart is a defensive lineman. But it all plays a part. I think they have the ability to air it out in this conference. And you may have some defenses that feel like they can challenge them, but I don't know if it comes to we both got to score 36, who's going to get there, right? Like you scored 35. We have to now score 36. Who's the quarterback who you feel comfortable doing that with? And listen, the offensive player of the year has been predicted extremely well. I know Irv Mulligan won last year, but first off, running backs winning is not the regular. But all in all, offensive player of the year has been predicted extremely well over the last 5 years. Last year, it was Miles Crawley. That's the one big misstep. The one big misstep by the conference is saying that Crawley was going to win the offensive player of the year. Now, did we expect Irv Mulligan to come in off of, he ended last season on with an injury. I was going to say on injured reserve, but he ended last season with an injury. Did we expect for him to come back in and have the type of season that he had? No, we didn't. But Crawley also wasn't that good. That being said, he was in a position kind of like Morgan, where he was one of few, if not the only returning starter in the conference. And I know you can say, well, Morgan started in 2023 and he came back in 24. Yes, but he didn't start off the season as the starter number one. That went to I can't remember his first name, but Jay Brown. And then also you had that battle with Morgan and McDonald and McCoy, right? Like you had a battle for the starting quarterback role towards the beginning of the season. So I think that putting Morgan in that for sure starter category is not the most accurate in my opinion. That's why I don't include him. But even if you did, that's one or two, maybe three. If you just saying someone else is around who I can't think of right now, but it wasn't in a prominent place. Jace Wilson? He was the newcomer of the year. He didn't start week one. Like it just wasn't a lot of returning starters in the SWAC. Same here. So I got why they picked Crawley, but it didn't work out. You go after that though, Jeremy Musa, 2023 preseason, postseason. Shedeur Sanders, 2022, preseason, postseason. Akil Glass, 2021, preseason, postseason. Then even if you go back to 2019, so this is just going over the last 5 seasons, not the last 5 years, but last 5 seasons. Noah Johnson was the predicted offensive player of the year. He gets hurt. He's replaced by Felix Harper, and he wins the SWAC championship, and he wins the SWAC offensive player of the year. So, I mean, I can't count Noah Johnson against the conference because he got hurt. He literally could not win it. The only miss you really had, and then the backup quarterback comes in and he wins it. So the only real miss that they had was Crawley. That's it. So I think that they've done a pretty good job of predicting who'd be the best quarterback in the conference for the most part in recent history. And if Jacobian Morgan can be that, which I think that he has the absolute capability to be, yeah, Jackson State with everything that's around Morgan is going to be very tough to beat. And if it ever comes down to QB versus QB, there's not many guys who I think we're going to take over Jacobian Morgan, if any. Now, as we push forward, we're going to go to the defensive side of the ball. Ckelby Givens is the preseason defensive player of the year after sharing that title in 2024. Let's see why I think that this is a really safe bet as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, and Game Time is the only place I'm buying any tickets. I don't care if it's Dallas Wings tickets. I don't care if it's Dallas Cowboys tickets. I don't care if it's Dallas Mavericks tickets. Maybe I want to go see Cooper Flagg. Maybe I want to go see Paige Beckers. I don't know who wants to go see Dak Prescott, but maybe I want to go. Maybe I want to go see CD Lamb, right? Like maybe I want to go see any of these people because I'm local. I go to Game Time. Maybe I want to go to a wrestling event, a ballet show, a theater show, a comedy show, a concert. If I have to buy tickets, I'm on Game Time. It's simple. I don't care what it is, sporting event or non-sporting event. If I need tickets, I'm going to Game Time because they have the best prices. They have zone deals. They let me know, hey, this is everything you're going to have to pay for. No more getting the checkout and all of a sudden I have an extra $30 on my name. No. Give me the full price. All-in pricing is my favorite feature, and it'll be yours too once you download the app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, because if you're new, you get $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Saints. That's my show. I'm checking it out daily. Ross Jackson, that's my guy. All right, so make sure you're checking out what's going on as we move into the training camp portion of the NFL conversation. We already talked about Jacobian Morgan, the preseason offensive player of the year, and how he is the guy who I think sets apart Jackson State from the rest of the pack. But when you look on the defensive side of the ball, Ckelby Givens is predicted to win his second straight defensive player of the year, something we have not seen in the last 5 years. And quite frankly, I think he's earned the right to be considered a very likely candidate to pull off the back-to-back. Let's go through the last 5 years, the same way that we did with the offense. Let's go through it with the defense. And when it comes to defense, because it's not just quarterback, I'm going to tell you where these guys landed if they didn't win. Spoiler, most of them didn't win. Defensive player of the year has actually been the exact opposite of offensive player of the year. They've had the exact opposite luck when it comes to predicting who will be the top defender in the conference. And honestly, they had some pretty safe bets. They did. They had some pretty safe bets that just did not pan out. But last year is the only time in the last 5 years they got it right. They said Ckelby Givens would win, and he did. He shared that with Andrew Jones. I've talked about that a few times. I thought Andrew Jones this season didn't get the credit it deserved while it was going on, but him getting co-defensive player of the year is the accreditation that I was looking for. I was actually looking for him flat out getting it. I also thought that James Burgess you can't give it 3, you can't split it 3 ways, but I thought that James Burgess was phenomenal. But we're not going to get into the defensive player of the year race from 2024 again. Ckelby Givens was predicted to win. He did. He shared it with Andrew Jones, but he was a winner. 2023, Sundiata Anderson was supposed to win it. Isaiah Major ends up getting it. Anderson did still end first team, though. He was still a first team all-SWAC player at the end of the season. Then you have Isaiah Land, who was predicted to win it in 2022. He was still first team, but he wasn't nearly the same. Like, he was not nearly the same. It ended up going to Aubrey Miller. The thing about Land is he had just won the Buck Buchanan Award. He had just been named the best defender in all of FCS football. How could you not name this guy as the preseason SWAC Defensive Player of the Year? Things just didn't pan out for him. And, that's the same thing that happened the year prior. In 2021, Jordan Lewis was predicted to be the SWAC Defensive Player of the Year. He had just came off of a spring Buck Buchanan Award-winning season. Isaiah Land ends up winning it, right? And then you go back and also Jordan Lewis did not do anything. He wasn't all SWAC first or second team. He really did struggle. I think that those were kind of like one hit. I don't want to say one hit wonders, but at the time it seemed like they had one breakout season. Then in 2019, Solomon Muhammad was supposed to win. He didn't. He was still on the first team all SWAC though. It just ended up going to Keontae Hampton, the Jackson State linebacker. So when you go through it, there's no one who's repeated, and there's no one who was actually predicted to win except for Givens and actually did. Can he do that back to back? Can he defeat the odds yet again? I say he does because he has a reputation that says he'll do exactly what he was supposed to. Go through those guys, at least since 2021, because that's when I've been doing the show. Isaiah Land. Isaiah Land comes in, and he has an amazing year. Or excuse me, Jordan Lewis. Let's start off with Jordan Lewis. Jordan Lewis has an amazing spring season. He's the Buck Buchanan Award winner, but it did feel like he kind of just shot up. Can he do it again? Then you look at Isaiah Land. He definitely just shot up. Can he do it again? That was a weird season for FAMU. That 2022 season, really odd for the Rattlers. You look at Sundiata Anderson, he didn't have a season where he just shot up. He was pretty consistent. But the thing about Anderson is I think you were expecting him to shoot up. I think you were expecting him to take his consistent production and make an extra leap to become one of the best players in the conference. And he remained, to be the best defender in the conference. He remained one of the best, but he didn't elevate to being the guy. And I think that's the biggest difference is Sundiata Anderson. You go through his numbers. Anderson was like a 15 tackle for a loss guy, and that include 5, 6, 7 sacks, right? So like he had 7 sacks in his junior year. Or was it 5? He had 5 and 7 at some point. Forgive me for flipping those, but Anderson was already in that lane of being about 15 tackles for a loss, 5 to 7 sacks as a junior. Then he came back and just did that again in his senior season. He came back and did that in his senior campaign. So he was exactly what he showed himself to be. The difference is if Ckelby Givens is who he has shown, if Ckelby Givens, is who he has shown himself to be, he'll win it again. That's the difference. He has a high level of continued success. I think that Anderson showed a lot of potential to take that extra jump, and he was still very talented. I don't want to downplay him. He was very talented. Isaiah Major being the leader of the Dark Cloud defense that went on to win a Celebration Bowl and was the top defense. It makes sense. He was the leader on a championship winning team that also was one of the best defenses. I think Alabama State will probably have an argument on whether or not they were the best defense that season, but still, that hurt him. But let's go through Ckelby Givens. 2022, 21 tackles for a loss with 7 sacks, which means he had 14 run stops because tackles for a loss is going to combine both your sacks and tackles in the run game for a loss. Then you look at 2023 when he did win the SWAC Defensive Player of the Year. He had 33 and a half tackles for a loss with 16 sacks. So you're looking at, that's crazy. I don't remember that number being that high, but I looked at it on Southern's website just today. He has 16 sacks, 17 and a half tackles for a loss. So you're looking at, gosh, that don't feel right, man. But you're looking at a guy who has done it in both sides of the football. I mean, both sides of the game, both aspects of the game. Because, listen, in today's NFL, you're getting a lot of rush specialists. You're getting a lot of pass rush specialists. Yeah, they say he has 16 sacks. That's crazy. I don't feel like he has 16 sacks. But you're having a lot of pass rush specialists. That's not Ckelby Givens. Ckelby Givens is a complete player. He rushes the passer very well, but he also stops the run very well. And the thing about being a pass rush specialist is if I take you out of the game when it's passing time, A lot of times, I can run right at you. That's number one. I can run right at you. Or I'll just run away from you. Regardless, you're not that impactful in the run game. Ckelby Givens can stop the run. He will chase down a stretch play on the opposite side. He will stop you if you're running towards him from pushing back the defensive tackle, the offensive tackle. He has all of this in his arsenal. Ckelby Givens has shown over the last 2 years that he has a repeated trend of being a good run stopper and a good pass rusher. Last year, he was great at rushing the passer. He was great at 16 sacks. Let's say he doesn't hit that number. Let's say there's a slight regression and he has, 25 tackles for a loss. 9 to 11 of them come from sacks. I think we're going to say that was a successful season. I think we may even say that was a defensive player of the year winning season, and he probably won't share his gold again. He's being real. I don't think we're going to see another co-defensive player of the year. But as we push forward, I want to talk about the NBA because I love what the NBA is doing as far as how they are scheduling these HBCU All-Star Classics. It is phenomenal. Or HBCU Classic on All-Star Weekend. Let's get into that as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Whew. HBCU Classics at All-Star Weekend. The HBCU Classic at All-Star Weekend is a phenomenal event, right? Like, it's a great way to put the HBCUs on a big time stage. But a lot of times when you see these type of events, when you see these type of, we want to broadcast HBCUs to the world, it feels like it's just a handful of teams that get picked. And what I appreciate from the NBA is that they are not falling victim to that. They are not saying we're just going to get a couple of teams. You do need big schools. You need big brands because at the end of the day, All-Star Weekend is a depreciating commodity. It just is. You can tell by the way that the All-Star Weekend, the dunk contest is talked about. And the 3-point contest is not beloved, which to me is crazy. It's crazy to me that as much as people shoot threes, they don't tune into and talk about the 3-point contest as much as I believe they should. But regardless, this is a depreciating commodity. So you're going to have to get people to buy in. And you're just putting a random college game on in the middle of All-Star Weekend. There's people who saying, I don't even watch college basketball. But there's some who are on the fence. And in order to grab them, you have to you got to pull them in. You have to compel them to watch because they're not going to compel themselves. So what do you do to do that? You get big brands, but you don't have to stay on the mid-major level in order to pull in big brands. And what I appreciate is that the NBA has said, we're going to take every single conference and independence, and we're going to move them into this game in some point. This game started 5 years ago. Started in 2022. So you had 22, 23, 24, 25. And this year we're about to have the 26. Or next year we're going to have 26. And that's been announced to be North Carolina A&T versus Hampton. That's the independence. Yes, you could have Tennessee State in this, but we're not. Okay. You can only have 2 teams who are playing. And they decided that they're going to do Hampton versus North Carolina A&T. Probably because it was already on the schedule. But you're looking at the history of this. Let's go down. 2026, A&T versus Hampton. 2025, Morehouse versus Tuskegee. 2024, Virginia Union versus Winston-Salem State. 2023, Southern versus Grambling. 2022, Morgan State versus Howard. As you go through, you're seeing every single conference has now been represented, and you're getting big brands in every single one. So if you're talking about representation and you're talking about business, these 2 things, in my opinion, have aligned throughout the entirety of the HBCU Classic on All-Star Weekend. You're having A&T versus Hampton. These are 2 huge brands. There are also 2 schools who are independent of an HBCU conference. And oftentimes they find themselves left out of HBCU spaces because they're not competing against HBCUs on a weekly basis. You look at 2025. Morehouse versus Tuskegee. These are huge brands. We're talking about huge brands as a school. Morehouse, enough said, right? Like, I don't even think you have to say anything about the house. Tuskegee, Historic. I'm talking about a historic university. Big time brands. You're looking at 2024, Virginia Union. Excuse me, the SIAC is who they represent. 2024, you have Virginia Union versus Winston-Salem State. Ben Wallace came from Virginia Union. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say I know all about the history of Virginia Union basketball and everything, but Ben Wallace with the Fro Pistons, one of the more memorable players from that era, I would say, an NBA champion from that era. Shout out my boy Trap, Detroit basketball. But you got Ben Wallace, who's an HBCU alum. I'm sure he'll be present. You're looking at big house games for Winston-Salem State, a literal Hall of Famer for what he was able to do in HBCU basketball. You're looking at big time brands. That's in the CIAA. You're looking at 2023, Southern versus Grambling. Hey, for my money, the biggest HBCU game of the regular season on a yearly basis. It's the most tuned, or it's the game that I want to tune into every single year. And I'm talking about since I was a youth. When I was a youth, I wanted to see the Classic. To me, that's still the Classic. Look, I went to Texas Southern, and we have the Labor Day Classic. I'm about to say State Fair Classic, but that's PV versus Grambling. We have the Labor Day Classic. The Classic, to me, when you say, hey, you watched the Classic last year? I'm thinking Grambling versus Southern. It has that type of national appeal. For a long time, it was the only HBCU game played on TV. Not ever, but HBCU game played on TV. Then you have Morgan State versus Howard. And Howard is one of the top 3 to 5 brands as far as HBCUs go, period. So you have the SWAC, you go MEAC, SWAC, CIAA, SIAC, and now the independents. You can't tell me that wasn't purposeful. There has not been a conference that has been repeated yet. There's not a conference that has been repeated, and they've gone on year 5. It would not shock me if this becomes a rotation of MEAC, SWAC, CIAA, SIAC, independents. And then Tennessee State will probably find their way into this. But the only thing is, you're going to have to schedule an HBCU. A&T and Hampton play every single year. Every single year they play. So whenever the independents roll around, you could schedule them every single year. So I love this. I love that the NBA is being very intentional about spreading the wealth and not just saying we're going to take SWAC, we're going to take the MEAC, and that's it. Or we're going to take A&T. That's it. No, we're getting the MEAC, SWAC, SIAC, and CIAA all involved in this game. To me, that's very important. To me, that's intentional. And to me, it's the right call. So thank you, NBA. Can't get no HBCU players in that mug, but we can definitely get some HBCU athletes who are performing on All-Star Weekend. On tomorrow's episode, because we're back, we're 5 days. Y'all see, we're back Monday, Tuesday. Boom, get used to me. See my face. All right, hope you like it, because you're going to see a whole lot of it. But tomorrow, we're going to talk about what we want to see at SWAC Media Day, because technically, we'll drop 7 a.m. SWAC Media Day will start at 10. Y'all got a 3-hour window to come holler at your boy before the event. But honestly, come holler at me regardless, and then go back and watch it again. See if you saw what I was looking for. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.